I did not know where I was. A thick, grey fog surrounded me completely. It was like being wrapped in a cold, damp blanket. I could not see my own hands in front of my face. The world was gone, swallowed by this endless mist. The air was heavy and silent, and the silence made my ears ring. I tried to call out to see if anyone was there, but my voice felt small and lost. It was as if the fog was a living thing and it was holding its breath, waiting for me to do something. I could feel my heart thumping against my ribs, a lonely drum in the quiet. I took a step forward, my foot landing on soft, damp ground. Then another step and another. It was like walking through a dream. I had no idea where I was going or where I had come from. Was there a path? I could not see one. Every direction looked exactly the same, a wall of shifting grey. The cold seeped into my clothes, making me shiver. A strange feeling of curiosity started to bubble up inside me, pushing past the fear. What was this place? And why was I here? The questions hung in the air, unanswered, just like the fog. A faint sound reached my ears. It was a soft, shuffling noise like leaves being pushed aside. Or maybe it was just the wind. But there was no wind. The fog was perfectly still. I stopped walking and listened hard. The sound came again, a little closer this time. My curiosity turned back to fear. Was something else out here with me, something hiding in the mist? I held my breath, straining to hear more, but the world fell silent again. The only sound was the frantic beat of my own heart, a drum signaling my panic in the vast, empty grey. I decided I had to keep moving. Standing still felt worse than walking into the unknown. At least moving felt like I was doing something, taking some kind of control. I stretched my hands out in front of me like a blind person feeling their way. My fingers touched nothing but the cold, wet air. The ground remained soft under my feet, a carpet of unseen moss or grass. I walked slowly, carefully, my senses on high alert. The fog was a curtain, and I felt like I was about to step onto a stage. But I had no idea what the play was about or what part I was supposed to play. After what felt like a very long time, the ground beneath my feet changed. It became harder, covered in twigs and dry leaves that crunched with every step. The sound was loud in the silence. I looked up, and through the thinnest parts of the fog, I could see dark shapes. They were tall and thin, like fingers pointing to a sky I could not see. Trees. I had walked into a forest. The fog was still thick here, weaving between the dark trunks like a ghostly serpent. A new feeling washed over me, a sense of unease. Forests at night are scary, but a forest in a fog like this felt 10 times worse. The air in the forest was different. It carried strange sounds. Faint whispers seemed to come from all around me. I could not make out any words. It was just a soft, hissing sound, like the wind rushing through leaves. But the air was still. There was no wind. The whispers seemed to rise from the trees themselves, as if they were sharing secrets I was not meant to hear. I stopped and turned my head, trying to pinpoint the source of the sound, but it was everywhere and nowhere at once. It made the hairs on my arms stand up. Were they warning me, or were they laughing at me? I continued walking deeper into the strange, whispering woods. The trees grew closer together, their branches like a tangled net above me. The fog seemed to get thicker in here, trapped by the canopy of leaves I could only imagine. My feet kept crunching on the forest floor, a rhythm that accompanied the constant, soft whispers. I felt like I was being watched. Every dark tree trunk could be hiding something. Every shadow could be a creature waiting to jump out. The initial curiosity I felt was now completely replaced by a growing sense of dread. I wanted to run, but I was afraid of tripping over a root I could not see. Suddenly I saw something different. It was a shape that was not a tree. It was low to the ground and it had straight edges. I moved closer, my hand still outstretched. My fingers brushed against cold, hard stone. It was a bench, a stone bench sitting all alone in the middle of this whispering, foggy forest. Who would put a bench here? It made no sense. I ran my hand along its surface, feeling the damp moss that grew in its cracks. The whispers seemed to grow a little louder around the bench, as if it was a place of importance. I hesitated, then sat down, hoping to catch my breath and make sense of it all. Sitting on the cold stone bench, I tried to calm my racing heart. The whispers continued their soft dance around me, but they seemed less threatening now. As my eyes adjusted more to the gloom, I saw it. Through a gap in the trees, a different kind of light was glowing. It was not a warm light, but a faint silvery shimmer. It was close. Curiosity got the better of me again. I stood up from the bench and walked towards the strange glow. The trees thinned out, and I found myself standing at the edge of a clearing. In the center of the clearing stood a house. It was an old house with a pointed roof and dark windows that looked like empty eyes. The silvery light was coming from the house itself, but I could not see any lamps or candles. The light seemed to radiate from its very walls. The fog swirled around its base, making it look like it was floating. The whispers of the forest faded behind me, replaced by a deep, humming silence. I felt a strange pull towards the house, a mixture of fear and fascination. It looked like a place from a ghost story, a place where secrets were kept locked away behind its dark front door. I walked slowly towards the front door. It was made of heavy, dark wood. There was no handle, no knob, no way to open it. I pushed against it, but it did not move. It was sealed shut. I moved along the side of the house, running my hand against the cold, damp walls. The windows were just black squares of nothing. But then I came to one window that was different. It was not black. It was a mirror. A large, ornate mirror had been fixed where the window should have been. It reflected the grey, swirling fog. It reflected the dark shapes of the trees behind me. I stepped closer to the mirror, wanting to see my own reflection. I needed to see myself, to prove I was real in this strange, misty world. But when I looked, there was nothing there. The mirror showed the fog and the trees, but it did not show me. I was invisible. I waved my hand in front of the mirror. Nothing. It was as if I did not exist. A cold wave of panic washed over me, more intense than anything I had felt before. If the mirror could not see me, was I really here at all? Was I a ghost in this foggy land? The house of reflections had shown me an empty space where I was supposed to be. I stumbled back from the mirror window, my mind reeling. How could I not have a reflection? The questions spun in my head, making me dizzy. I turned away from the terrifying mirror and continued my search around the house. I had to find a way inside. The house held answers, I was sure of it. As I rounded the back corner, I found another door. This one was small, almost hidden by overgrown ivy. It had a simple, rusty iron ring for a handle. I pulled on it, not expecting it to work, but with a loud groan, the door creaked open, revealing a square of perfect darkness inside. Taking a deep breath, I stepped over the threshold and into the house. The door swung shut behind me with a heavy thud, plunging me into absolute blackness. The air inside was stale and musty, thick with the smell of dust and decay. For a moment I was completely blind, my arms stretched out in front of me. I took a tentative step forward, and my foot hit something soft. I shuffled forward until my hands found a wall. Following it, I moved slowly through the darkness, my heart pounding with a new kind of fear. This was the fear of the unseen, of what might be lurking just inches away. My searching hands found a switch on the wall. I flicked it, and a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling flickered to life, casting a weak yellow light across the room. I was in a small study. Bookshelves lined the walls, but they were all empty. The floor was covered in a thick layer of dust, except for my own footprints leading from the door. In the center of the room was a single object, a huge grandfather clock. It was made of dark wood, and it was tall and imposing. It reached almost to the ceiling, a silent giant in the dusty room. I walked over to the clock, drawn by its silent presence. The glass door was covered in a film of grime. I wiped it away with my sleeve to look at the clock's face. The long, elegant hands were frozen. They were pointing to exactly 12 o'clock. The pendulum, a large brass disc, hung perfectly still inside its case. The clock was not ticking. There was no sound at all in the room. Time had stopped here. I looked at the frozen hands and felt a strange calm. In a world of confusing fog and whispers, this stillness felt solid and real. It was a moment of peace in the middle of the mystery. Leaving the room with the frozen clock, I found a hallway. The weak light from the study did not reach very far, so I was walking into darkness again. I felt my way along the wall, my hand brushing against peeling wallpaper. The house was bigger than I thought. The silence was unnerving. I expected to hear creaks and groans from the old building, but there was nothing. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath, just like the fog outside had been. Every step I took felt loud in the stillness, echoing down the dark corridor ahead of me. I came to another doorway and pushed the door open. This room was different. It was filled with a flickering grey light. The source of the light was an old television set sitting on a small table in the corner. It was the only piece of furniture in the room. The television was on, but the screen was not showing a program. It was just static. A chaotic dance of black and white dots. A loud hissing sound filled the room, the sound of the static. It was a harsh, grating noise that was the complete opposite of the forest's soft whispers. It felt aggressive and confusing. I stood in the doorway, mesmerized by the screen. The flickering dots seemed to form patterns, then dissolve into chaos again. It was like looking at a million angry insects trapped behind the glass. The hissing sound was constant, a digital scream that filled my ears and made my head ache. Why was this television on, all alone in an empty room in an abandoned house? Who had turned it on? The questions piled up, each one making the mystery deeper and more unsettling. The static felt like a message I could not understand, a signal from a broken world. Slowly I walked closer to the television. The hissing grew louder, more intense. I stared into the swirling grey chaos on the screen, and for a second I thought I saw a shape in the static, an outline, a face. It was there for just a moment, a pale, distorted image in the noise, and then it was gone. I blinked, unsure if I had really seen it. Was my mind playing tricks on me? I leaned closer, my face just inches from the screen, searching the frantic dance of dots for another glimpse. The static was like the fog, a curtain of confusion. But this time, I felt something was trying to break through. I backed away from the television, the hissing static still ringing in my ears. I could not stay in that room any longer. I found another door at the back of the static-filled room and opened it. I was not prepared for what I saw. I stepped out of the house and into a garden. But it was not a garden of flowers. It was a garden of statues. Dozens of them were scattered across a large, overgrown lawn. They were all made of white marble, and they seemed to glow in the grey, misty light. The fog was here too, swirling around the bases of the statues, making them look like they were floating. The silence was back. The harsh hiss of the static was gone, replaced by a profound and heavy quiet. The statues were all of people, men, women, and children. They were in different poses. Some were sitting, some were standing, and some were captured in the middle of an action, like running or dancing. Their faces were all very detailed. They looked so real, too real. I walked among them, my footsteps silent on the soft overgrown grass. It was like walking through a frozen moment in time, a party where all the guests had suddenly turned to stone. The feeling in the air was one of awe, mixed with a deep sadness. I stopped in front of a statue of a young girl. She was holding a ball, her head tilted as if she was about to throw it. Her expression was one of joy, but her eyes were blank, white stone. Looking at her perfect, frozen form, a chilling thought entered my mind. What if these were not statues? What if they were real people trapped in stone? The idea was terrifying. I looked around at the silent figures, at their captured smiles and their frozen gestures. The garden suddenly felt like a prison, a beautiful but terrible collection of lost souls. I reached out and touched the arm of a statue of a man who was reading a book. The stone was cold and smooth, but for a split second, I thought I felt it warm beneath my fingertips. I pulled my hand back quickly. Was I imagining it? I looked at his face, at his calm, focused expression. He seemed so peaceful. All of them did. Maybe this was not a prison. Maybe it was a sanctuary, a place of perfect peace, away from the confusing fog and the screaming static. I stood in the center of the garden, surrounded by the silent, white figures, feeling a strange mix of terror and tranquility. I left the garden of statues behind. The image of their silent faces burned into my mind. I found a small rusted gate at the far end of the garden. It opened onto a narrow path that led away from the house. The path was made of cracked paving stones and it sloped downwards. The fog was still my constant companion, thick and heavy all around me. As I walked, a new sound started to cut through the silence. It was a rhythmic, mournful sound, a foghorn. It was distant at first, then grew louder and closer with every step I took. The path led me to the edge of a cliff. I could hear the sound of waves crashing against rocks far below, a powerful roaring noise hidden by the mist. The foghorn boomed again, much closer now. I looked out into the grey emptiness and saw a light. It was a bright, white light that swept through the fog in a slow, steady circle. A lighthouse. It stood on a rocky outcrop just off the coast, a tall, lonely tower against the endless grey. The light was a beacon of hope in this strange world. It was a sign of life, of purpose. It was a guide. A sense of determination filled me. I had to get to that lighthouse. It felt like the final destination of my journey. The path continued, winding its way steeply down the cliff face. It was a dangerous walk. The stones were slippery with sea spray, and the fog made it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. I held onto the cold, rocky cliff face as I carefully made my way down. The sound of the crashing waves grew louder and louder, a constant, angry roar. The foghorn continued its sad, lonely call, and the sweeping beam of light was my only guide. After a long and treacherous descent, I reached the bottom of the cliff. A narrow causeway of wet black rocks connected the mainland to the small island where the lighthouse stood. The waves crashed on either side of the causeway, sending plumes of white spray into the air. The lighthouse loomed above me now, a giant tower of stone. Its light swept over my head, temporarily blinding me before plunging me back into the grey gloom. I took a deep breath and started to walk across the causeway, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. The answer was in that tower. I was sure of it. The door to the lighthouse was heavy and made of solid iron. It was not locked. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The air was salty and damp. The only light came from a small window high above. A spiral staircase made of metal snaked its way up the inside of the tower. I began to climb, my footsteps echoing in the enclosed space. Round and round I went, the climb seeming to last forever. With each step, my anticipation grew. What would I find at the top? Who was running the lighthouse? Would they have the answers to all my questions? Finally, I reached the top. I stepped out into the lamp room. It was a circular room made almost entirely of glass, offering a panoramic view of nothing. Just the endless, swirling grey fog. In the center of the room was the source of the light, a giant lens and a powerful bulb that rotated slowly on a complex mechanism. The mechanism was moving, but there was no one here operating it. It was working all by itself. The room was empty. There was no keeper, no guide, no one to explain this strange world to me. A wave of disappointment washed over me. I walked around the lamp, my hand trailing on the cool metal of the machinery. I looked out through the thick glass panels. The fog was so dense it was like a solid wall. The light from the lamp could cut through it, but my eyes could not. I felt a sense of despair. Had I come all this way for nothing? Was this journey just a meaningless circle leading me from one empty place to another? I looked at the house of reflections, the frozen clock, the static screen, the stone garden. They were all pieces of a puzzle, but I had no idea how to put them together. Then I saw it. On the far side of the room, leaning against the glass wall, was a mirror. It was a simple, full-length mirror, the kind you might have in a bedroom. Its frame was plain wood. My heart skipped a beat. After the mirror at the house that showed me nothing, I was afraid to look, but I had to. I walked slowly towards it. I stood in front of it and looked. This time I saw a reflection. I saw myself. A person stood there looking back at me, but it was not my face. It was the face I had seen for a split second in the static on the television screen. I stared at the face in the mirror, my mind struggling to understand. It was a familiar face, but I did not know from where. It looked tired and sad. The person in the mirror wore the same clothes as me. They stood in the same room. When I raised my hand, they raised theirs. It was my reflection, but it was not my face. It was someone else. Who was this person? And if that was them in the mirror, then who was I? The question sent a shockwave through my entire being. My identity, the one thing I had been sure of, was suddenly gone. The person in the mirror looked at me with pleading eyes. They opened their mouth, but no sound came out. But I could understand. A thought appeared in my mind, clear as a bell. It's time to wake up. The message was not in words, but in a feeling, a deep, certain knowledge. This whole journey, the fog, the house, the clock, the statues, the lighthouse, it was all a dream being had by the person in the mirror. I was a part of their dream, a character they had created to navigate this mysterious world. I was the curiosity, the fear, the awe they were feeling. I looked around the lamp room. The fog outside the glass began to thin. I could see hints of color, the blue of the sea, the green of the cliffs. The world was coming into focus. The frozen clock was time waiting to start again. The static was a mind trying to break through the noise. The statues were memories, frozen in place. The fog was the confusion of a deep sleep. All the symbols suddenly made sense. They were not just random, mysterious objects. They were pieces of a person's subconscious mind. My journey was their journey back to consciousness. The reflection in the mirror smiled, a sad but grateful smile. I knew what I had to do. I was the final key. My purpose was to reach this point, to understand and to let go. I looked at the face in the mirror one last time, my face that was not my face. I took a deep breath and I took a step forward. I stepped into the mirror. There was no crash of breaking glass. There was only a brilliant, all-consuming white light. The fog was gone. The whispers were gone. The static was gone. There was only silence and a feeling of peace. And somewhere far away, someone's eyes slowly began to open.